Um, hi, John. I'm excited to have this time to meet with you about the Impeach Trump Again campaign. As many of our followers and those that have been, with the campaign now since it started, have had, a variety of questions that have come out of this campaign. So we really want today to be about, how we, fight back a lot of the misinformation about the campaign, and just also give people the, idea around what impeachment and removal of Trump would actually look like in reality. We're starting this new series that's Facts Over Fascism. And as we know, we're seeing a lot of misinformation out there, and we just want to make sure that we are providing the facts for those that, have been following the campaign and want to know more. I'll jump into the first question. We're coming off of No Kings, as you know, this weekend. And so I just wanted to ask you, did you attend a No Kings rally this past Saturday on October 18th? And if you did, where did you attend? Who did you attend with? And also just generally, how did you feel being there?
Thanks, Jax. Yeah, no, I attended one with my wife and daughter in New York City where we were over the weekend, and it was very energizing. It was a neighborhood rally at Morningside Heights in Harlem, and there was a lot of energy there, people wanting to stand up and defend our democracy at this critical moment in history, and I was glad we could be there.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I know many of our followers were also out there. So, yeah, great to see that. I will jump into the next question. What does the Impeach Trump Again campaign mean to you as president of Free Speech for People with all the work that you've done, and just, your background too? So please feel free to share anything, of why this campaign means so much to you.
I'm grateful to be working with you and the whole team on this at Free to People and the people around the country who have stood up and joined us over 1 million strong, now signed on to our petition at impeachtrumpagain.org. I think what this means to me personally is that we really are in this moment where we have to face the reality that we have a would-be tyrant in the White House who needs to face accountability through the impeachment process. That is the constitutional remedy set out for dealing with someone who occupies the Oval Office and then tramples on the Constitution and the rule of law like Donald Trump is doing. And that process involves impeaching and removing a president, and that's the process we have to fight now for to go through with. I think that we have been at Free Speech People engaged in this work now for many years to stand up for our democracy, challenging big money in politics, protecting the right to vote, and our elections, confronting unchecked corporate power. But we're also clear that we need to take on corruption at the highest levels of our government. And today that involves the rampant corruption and abuse of power coming out of the Oval Office.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think kind of moving into that same vein, we would love to hear a little bit about how long the campaign has been going on for. Obviously, I know as one of the organizers, but we want to make sure that all those that are following us know how long we've been going on for, and also just yeah, if you want to share a little bit about your experience, this past year working with our campaigns team and watching this campaign grow as well.
Yes, so we launched this campaign on January 20th, 2025, Inauguration Day, moments after Donald Trump took the oath of office. We launched it then because he was already in defiance of the foreign and domestic emoluments clauses of the Constitution. He had refused to divest once again, as he did in January 2017, from his business interests all over the world, treating the Oval Office as a profit-making enterprise at the public expense. But as we also highlighted that day at impeachtrumpagain.org, we were launching it because of the corrupt and illegal practices leading up to the election, including the rampant corruption associated with that scheme by Elon Musk and Donald Trump to give people $1 million, lottery type version of it, if they registered to vote and pledged effectively to vote for Donald Trump. Patently illegal scheme. And there were other instances that we highlighted on our site around that. But of course, the grounds have grown exponentially since that time. We're now up to 25 grounds for impeachment. And, it's been a pleasure and honor working with the campaigns team and growing this. We've seen how people all over the country are demanding this change, and we're proud to stand with
Thank you so much for sharing that, John.
them. Sorry.
Yeah, I know that many of our followers have been, asking that same question of, well, how was he even able to run for president in the first place with all the corruption? So, it's great to hear you also talk about that and in our work previously. So, yeah, just awesome to hear. I'll move into the next question. So if Trump is impeached like he was in the past, right? We know that he's been impeached before. How can he actually be removed? We hear that a lot from our followers. There's skepticism of like how that would happen and how that would work. Because it didn't, work out the first time, the removal. So yeah, just wanted to hear overall, your comments to people on this and what they can do to help obviously support the campaign.
Yeah. So the process for impeachment starts in the House, and 50 plus 1% need to, or 50 plus one need to support it, meaning 218 votes to pass articles of impeachment. Then it goes to the Senate where there's a trial. And in that trial, you have to have two-thirds of the Senate voting to convict. Now, I know people will say, well, that's a tall order. It's never going to happen. But we're never going to get to this place of even advancing a trial if we don't first start the process in the House and build this case for impeachment. And there's no president in our nation's history more needing to face impeachment removal than Donald Trump. The evidence is overwhelming that he is, in fact, trampling on the Constitution and needs to be removed. And we need to start that process now.
Yeah, thank you, John. That actually leads me into one of my other questions here. So, you mentioned that we need 218 members of Congress to impeach Trump. So, I wanted to just ask you, how many do we currently have, and what is free speech for people doing to reach that number of 218 members of Congress to impeach Trump?
Right. Well, Congressman Al Green, as we know, in June of 2025, went to the floor of the House and forced a vote on articles of impeachment dealing with the illegal bombing of Iran. We were proud to help draft those articles with him in his office. That led to 78 members voting with him, so 79 being on record as of that vote for impeachment. Congressman Andre Carson of Indiana became the 80th the following day when he announced he was going to co-sponsor Congressman Green's articles, though he didn't vote that day before to advance them. He was now joining the cause. So we're up to 80. That's quadruple the number of those who were on record prior to that vote. And it shows that when we force this question onto the floor, members will come forward and stand for impeachment. But we got to go obviously beyond 80, and we're going to keep going with this. We're going to keep building the campaign. As I mentioned, over 1 million now having signed on, and we want to get even further, not more numbers of people signing on. And Women's March, of course, has joined us at the national level, and other groups like Citizens Impeachment and 14th Now, the Removal Coalition. All of these groups are standing up to demand this. So we do think the movement is growing, but we also want other champions beyond Congressman Green. He should not be the only one that's saying he's going to introduce additional articles of impeachment, as he has just recently announced. There should be other members who step up and introduce their own articles of impeachment. Any one of our grounds on our site at impeachtrumpagain.org is a basis for an article or articles of impeachment. And we're happy if members of Congress want to simply cut and paste from our site and put that forward into the House of Representatives. We've provided detail throughout our site on the evidence showing why these are abuses of power and why Donald Trump should face impeachment through them. So, really, the question is about coverage and those members who need to abide by their oath of office. Every member of Congress takes the same oath that Donald Trump took to protect and defend the Constitution, and they need to abide by that oath, follow the mandate of that oath, and invoke the impeachment power at this critical moment in our history.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that, John. And I will say, for those that are listening, that, if you want to go through that long list, our incredible team of constitutional lawyers has, in detail written up all of those 25 grounds for impeachment. And so you can go to impeachtrumpagain.org, or the link is also in our bio. But just to read up on these, each of us individually as citizens has the right to do that. And the right to, also pressure members of Congress to make this happen. And so, on that note, John, is there anything you would say to people that maybe they know their member of Congress didn't vote for impeachment or tabled it? How would you ask them, or if they asked you, how would you say, the best way to get involved in this campaign and also to put pressure on your representative would be?
Absolutely. Well, first, I think they ought to contact their member of Congress via email, via phone, and demand that they stand on the side of impeachment, on the side of our Constitution, on the side of our democracy. They can take, as we've highlighted, any of the grounds to highlight the kidnapping of people off the streets of our country and sending them to foreign torture prisons, the illegal removal of U.S. residents without due process under the law, the use of the military, sending the military into our nation's cities, declaring effectively war against people of this country, levying war against the United States, individual states, and their people, which is an act of treason, the highest crime of all. The usurping of Congress's authority to appropriate money. Congress is the only entity in the branches of government that has the authority to appropriate money. Donald Trump's frozen trillions of dollars of public funds that have been appropriated by Congress without any authority to do so. The defiance of multiple court orders, federal courts all over the country issuing orders against the Trump administration, and the steady defiance of those court orders, refusing to comply with them, an attack on the judiciary. The list goes on. And all of these points can be made to your member of Congress, urging that they stand up on the side of democracy. In addition to emailing and contacting your member of Congress, we urge people to write letters to the editor, to their local papers, to highlight this and ask, where is their member of Congress? We urge people to show up as 7 million did this past Saturday at the No Kings rallies all across the country. And they can download signs from our site, Impeach Trump Again, to highlight this message of the need for impeachment, going forward against Donald Trump. Calling into radio stations, talk radio is a great way to reach people and ask the question, why are we not talking about impeachment? There are many other ways for people to get engaged, but I think the important thing is that we recognize that we have the numbers. We have over 1 million and many millions more, I believe, that recognize that this would-be tyrant in the White House needs to be held accountable through the impeachment process.
Thank you, John. That was really helpful. Yeah, kind of moving into what can be done, right? So how are we going to move this forward? A lot of people are asking us, well, when is it going to happen? Just do it now. And so obviously want to share with everyone following too that we are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. So none of us are members of Congress ourselves. We really are, working with incredible constitutional lawyers that are doing this work 24 hours a day, tracking these impeachable offenses. As we know, they just continue to grow. And so knowing that, we all did hear J.B. Pritzker's call for the 25th Amendment, and there's a lot of excitement around that. And so just wanted to ask you briefly, if you could describe, what the difference between invoking the 25th Amendment is, and then also calling for impeachment and removal, how the processes are different, and also just how a non-lawyer can understand these processes and how we can actually remove Trump.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm very glad Illinois Governor Pritzker has called for the removal of Donald Trump. But I do think that the process that we need to focus on is impeachment. The 25th Amendment requires that a majority of the cabinet votes effectively to remove Donald Trump along with the vice president. And that's based on the view that he is incapacitated from serving. Now, I think there's a strong basis for invoking the 25th Amendment based on Trump's behavior, but I don't think there's a realistic chance that a majority of the cabinet and the vice president will turn on Donald Trump and do that. What I do think is possible is that we, the people, can make our voices heard through our elected representatives in the Congress, that they do their duty to invoke the impeachment power, which is a power they alone in the Article 1 branch of government, the Congress has with respect to dealing with this situation. So that's the distinction I would draw between the 25th Amendment strategy and the impeachment strategy. Look, I recognize people have heard the word impeachment before, that they've seen that Trump was impeached twice before, but that is not the reason to abandon this very constitutional remedy that's there to deal with a would-be tyrant in the White House. This is the way the framers created this remedy. That's how they envisioned that someone who would engage in these kinds of abuses of power would be held accountable. The framers were clear. We would have three co-equal branches of government. There would be no kings or tyrants that would govern in America. But they also set up this extra guardrail, the impeachment clause, Section 4 of Article 2, and that's the power we need to invoke today.
Thank you, John. That was really helpful. I think many of our followers, there's a lack of maybe understanding of even how our democratic process works at times. And so it's just really helpful to hear from a lawyer, but also an expert on constitutional law of how this process works and how it can actually, how we can move forward with it. And yeah, looking ahead then at, if Trump is impeached, there's a lot of questions around, well, what about other members of Trump's administration, right? And also if Trump gets removed, does JD Vance get put in play? And so there's just a lot of questions around what that would look like, and if we are also calling for impeachment of any other members of the administration. And yeah, just wanted to see your thoughts on that and what we've done at Free Speech for People to kind of answer that question for people.
Yes, well, certainly Donald Trump is not the only member of the Trump administration who's committing abuse of power. And we have documented already on our site, Impeach Trump Again, other officials who should face the impeachment process, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., where we have a separate standalone site, impeachkennedynow.org, demanding his impeachment. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, all of these members of the cabinet who have engaged in abuses of power need to also be held accountable. And we outline in that section of our site the abuses of power those officials and others have committed. But I think it's also important to remember that if we go through the process of impeaching and removing Donald Trump, as we should, the very next person to come into that office, who would be JD Vance if he's impeached, if Trump is impeached and removed during this term, that individual, JD Vance, would have to know that he also will be held accountable for abuse of power that he's committed. And certainly going forward, there will be even greater scrutiny on the Oval Office after having just removed Donald Trump from public office. So I think the goal here is to lift up the Constitution in our democracy and apply it wherever it may lead. And that would include others in the administration beyond Donald Trump. But we have to start with Donald Trump. He's the one at the top. He's the insurrectionist in chief. He's the abuser in chief with respect to abuse of power, and he must be held accountable.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. I'm gonna get into one of the last questions in a moment. Before I do, I did want to, ask with this moment that we're in right now, and we're seeing continued attacks. We're seeing, the National Guard brought in to multiple cities across the country, and just the violence that's taking place, and also just the attacks of ICE. And so I just really wanted to ask you, obviously this campaign is intersectional in a lot of ways. We know that. I just wanted to, ask if you could share with our followers, like what other work we're also working on. I think some people think, oh, Free Speech People is only working on impeachment. No, we definitely are working a lot more. So, what other campaigns are we working on, and also how could they or how do they complement this campaign?
Yeah, well, another whole effort we have, as you know, is to call on state and local prosecutors around the country to hold Donald Trump accountable through their state criminal laws. It is commonly thought that somehow Donald Trump has absolute immunity to do whatever he wants now that he's back as president because of the Trump v. U.S. Supreme Court ruling establishing presidential immunity. But that actually is not true. It establishes presidential immunity for official acts. And as terrible as that decision is, extortion is not an official act. Kidnapping is not an official act. These are actions that Donald Trump has taken since becoming president, which are violations of state criminal laws in California, New York, and Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Illinois. We have filed letters before the state and local prosecutors there demanding that they open up criminal investigations into Trump's extortion of the 9 national law firms to the tune of nearly $1 billion, into his extortion of uh, and Global Paramount Global and Skydance with respect to the merger that was happening and his basically way he got $16 million from CBS sent over to him based on a frivolous lawsuit he had filed. But because there was this merger before the Securities and Exchange Commission that was going to be decided, he leveraged and misused that power to get that settlement money sent to him. He also got Stephen Colbert famously had his contract canceled, and he went ahead and got a Trump ally implemented as the head of CBS News now to oversee their news division. I mean, all of these things are absolute forms of extortion. And if we had an actual independent U.S. Justice Department, we would call on the federal Justice Department to also investigate this. But we know they've become an arm of Donald Trump to do his bidding on whatever he wants them to do, including going after his enemies, with rogue illegal prosecutions. But with respect to the state criminal laws, these state and local prosecutors have a separate parallel responsibility to enforce the law, and we're calling on them to do that. We're certainly calling them to do that with respect to kidnappings, the kidnapping of Mesa Turk off the streets of Somerville. We have a letter pending before the Massachusetts Attorney General and the Middlesex County DA in Massachusetts demanding they open a criminal investigation into her kidnapping. And then Kilmar Abrego Garcia out of Maryland, similarly, a letter before the Maryland Attorney General and state's attorney there. So we want state and local prosecutors to step up, and we're urging people to join us. We have various petitions on these campaigns, but calling on their state and local prosecutors to do their duty. Another way we're standing up is this newest statement we've now posted to our site calling for the abolition of ICE and the ending of immigration imprisonment. And this agency, ICE, is like secret police to Donald Trump. It's a rogue agency. It needs to be abolished. We detail in a very lengthy statement the history of ICE and why it must come to an end. We know there was legislation pending some years ago in Congress to abolish ICE. We think that should be reintroduced. We need to see leadership by members of Congress. But we know that people around the country and witnessing this violent attack that ICE is engaged in throughout our cities, that they recognize that this agency is beyond the law, needs to be held accountable, and ought to be abolished. And the ending imprisonment of immigrants is equally important. We should not be locking people up because they are undocumented. That's patently absurd, and that's what we're doing now. We're putting people behind bars because they fled persecution, they fled poverty, they decided to come to the United States. I mean, the number of undocumented immigrants who carry out things in this country, carry out work that people often don't do who are based here in the United States as citizens, picking our lettuce, picking our food. I mean, these farm workers are often at the lowest totem pole with respect to being paid and the conditions that they live in. And yet, somehow, we're going to say we're going to throw them all in jail. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. This practice of imprisoning people based on their immigration status needs to also come to an end. So those are a few of the campaigns we have related to accountability for this administration. But beyond that, We also are involved in election protection and standing up for the right to vote, fighting voter suppression, fighting voter intimidation. We have a number of court cases on that. We're also involved in taking on big money in politics, and the ways in which corporate and big money interests drown out the voices of ordinary voters. We want to put an end to that, and we have multiple campaigns designed to change our campaign finance system and make it more accountable to the people.
Thank you so much, John. That was a really good just debrief overall of a lot of our work. I know that a lot of our followers would also and have been, calling for the abolition of ICE and other work that we've been doing. So, if you're following us, please feel free to, check our bio. We have our link tree has basically all of our petitions listed out, so you can get involved and check them out. We're not just doing impeachment work. But we do know that it's at the forefront. There are so many other issues that we are all working on, and in a lot of ways, they're coming from this administration. So we're excited to be able to share our other campaigns with you all as well. And so just like lastly, going into something that comes up a lot is like how would you respond to a lot of the critics that we hear? Obviously, the last 9 months, we've heard a lot of different criticism around that this is not the right time for impeachment, that it isn't going to be successful, so why even try? And so obviously we're hearing that from all, all sides of the political spectrum and also just in general, people just being maybe also being confused by the process. But just would really love to hear from your expertise as a constitutional lawyer, and president at Free Speech for People, what you would say to some of the critics.
Yeah, well, we have a few responses. First, we either have a constitution or we don't. We either have an impeachment clause or we don't. If we're not going to invoke the impeachment clause at this very moment in history, then we're effectively saying that we're ceding the Constitution, we're giving up on it, and we refuse to give up on the Constitution. That's the first point. The second point is we normalize this conduct coming out of the White House, coming from Donald Trump, when we don't name it for what it is. These are high crimes, political crimes against the state. And we need to name that and not normalize this kind of conduct as somehow a policy dispute. There are policy disputes many people will have with the Trump administration, whether or not to cut Social Security, whether or not to cut Medicare. But that's not what this is. When you kidnap people off the streets and you send them to foreign prisons, that's an abuse of power. It's an impeachable offense. When you engage in rampant corruption and treat the Oval Office as a profit-making enterprise, that's an abuse of power, an impeachable offense. When you effectively engage in treason, declaring war on people in the United States, sending the military into our cities to attack people for standing up for their own rights, that's an abuse of power. It's an impeachable offense. When you attack the First Amendment, when you try to stomp out any dissent, that's the work of a tyranny. It's an abuse of power. It's an impeachable offense. So we need to name these actions as high crimes, not normalize this conduct. And then finally, we know that members of Congress, as I said, take the very same oath that Donald Trump took to protect and defend the Constitution. They have a duty to stand up, abide by that oath, and invoke the impeachment power now. There are going to be people who say, well, we're just going to wait. We're not even going to talk about the I word until we know the votes somehow are there. And that's a mistake, just as much as all the other reasons I've stated, because we need to build this case now. We need to build it every day for why this president must face impeachment and removal. And if the votes aren't there today, we still have to keep building it. If we remain silent and stay on the sidelines and not talk about the I word at all, then we're again saying that Donald Trump doesn't need to be held accountable until the votes are there. That's not what the framers envisioned with the impeachment clause. They put it in there for any member of Congress to invoke it, and we want champions like Congressman Al Green to stand up and invoke it today.
Thank you so much, John. I think it's a really great point you talked about, just like the oath of office. I think that's something that as citizens, we sometimes, because of the way that our government runs, we don't feel like we have necessarily the power when it should always be with the people. But because of corruption and because of a lot of the work that, our campaigns were working on, a lot of that corruption in our government, we see that there's just we give our politicians sometimes just not enough pressure maybe on some of this work. And I think impeachment and removal is just another one of those examples. And so, I'll say too that I think as an organizer and some of the questions that are coming out from those that are following the campaign have also been around, impeachment is a distraction or impeachment isn't the thing we should be talking about. And, for instance, a lot of people have been saying, we should focus on releasing the Epstein files. And that is something that obviously Free Speech for People has come out and said that we support that and we support the Transparency Act as well. So, yeah, I would just love to hear if you have any thoughts on maybe sometimes people feeling like an issue, we only can focus on one issue at a time. But yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, obviously we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can talk about impeachment while we also support the Epstein Files Transparency Act, while we also call for the abolition of ICE, while we also demand that state and local prosecutors do their job and enforce state criminal laws against Trump, while we protect the right to vote in our elections, while we take on big money in politics, while we show up and urge others to show up at No Kings rallies. But look, at the end of the day, there is only one constitutional remedy that deals with this kind of would-be tyrant out of the White House, and that is the impeachment process. That's the only remedy in the Constitution for this. And we're all about making clear that this is a power that we, the people, have through our elected representatives. It's time that we invoke that power and name this occupant of the White House for what he is. He's engaged in multiple abuses of power, impeachable offenses. He is a would-be tyrant and he needs to be removed from public office and not wait until January 2027 to start saying that. That's a huge mistake. We need to be saying it now repeatedly every day. And, I've had one member of Congress ask me, well, what is it you really want? Do you want article of impeachment being voted on Tuesday, and then another one being voted on Wednesday, and then another one being voted on Thursday? Is that what you really want? And of course, this member thought my response would be, oh, no, no, that's not what I want. And my response is yes, that is what we want. We want this debate every single day. We can have debates on the floor of the House of Representatives about other things, while we also every single day talk about the abuses of power that this president's engaged in. And wouldn't it be a great public education for the nation to have day one be about the kidnapping of people off the streets of our country and sending them to foreign torture prisons? And then let's have a debate on that article of impeachment. And then the second one would be about sending the military into the U.S. cities and effectively engaging in treason, declaring war on the people of the United States. Let's have that article of impeachment debate. There are 25 of these grounds, and each one of these grounds has subgrounds and detailed evidence. Any one of these can occupy the floor of the House for an article of impeachment, and that's what we should be doing. We should be talking about this every day. So yes, we believe we want to see members of Congress force these votes repeatedly and demand that members of Congress do their job. And you know what's going to happen if they do that? There will be more members standing up, particularly after 7 million showed up in the streets. There will be more members beyond the 80 already on record. And look, I understand that some people in Congress have this idea that somehow talking about the I word is not going to be good for them. But you know what? They have a duty and an oath to protect the Constitution. And, the bottom line here is that the people, the American people, already know that this president is engaged in multiple abuses of power. The polling shows that. National polling shows the majority support impeachment. A poll that we recently commissioned from Lake Research Partners shows in the House swing districts a plurality of voters support impeachment without any case for impeachment being made from the halls of Congress other than Congressman Green or any case in the mainstream media. So people intuitively know it when they see these videos of people being thrown to the ground by ICE, thrown into jail, or being sent to foreign torture prisons, or the military showing up repeatedly in different parts of the country, or the president misusing the Justice Department to prosecute his enemies. I mean, all of this they see and they recognize are abuses of power. So the only thing missing here is some backbone from members of Congress beyond Al Green, and we're looking for that backbone to be grown right away.
Absolutely. Yeah, John, I think that it's actually great to hear that you were like, yes, every day if we need to, because that, we're seeing daily abuses of power, right? We're having to track these daily now. And so, it makes sense. And I'm glad you mentioned about our 25 grounds of impeachment that there's multiple, acts of impeachable offenses within each one of those, right?
Yes.
So that's something that I think some people say, oh, only 25. And it's like, no, dive deeper, read and educate yourself on some of this. And if you are confused by any of the legal jargon, ask us questions and let's talk through it because obviously a lot of us organizers, we're hearing about multiple issues going on across the country. And I will say, as an organizer, it's really important that there is a strong allyship, I believe, between, lawyers and organizers right now. I think that's such a powerful dynamic, and not in every moment is that the most useful, but I think at this moment in time it is. And so it's just great to be able to also work with really dedicated constitutional lawyers and experts that, know that these abuses of power are happening and that also they can explain them in ways that are understandable, to the general public and work with organizers in doing that. So it's just really great to see that is happening. And it seems like there's more people wanting to know about how our legal process works in this country, right? And I think we saw that at No Kings, and we're seeing more people get educated. So yeah, just in general, just want to thank you for taking the time, John. As obviously you have so much that you are working on, and your communication with Brett Ball Green and just our relationship there. I think it's a great note to mention that, we are asking for other members of Congress, to step up and to also, bring forward their own article of impeachment if that's ours that we've listed, and that all the work has been done. It's right there for you. Just access it and start to educate yourself as well, because we're not all experts on everything. And so I think that's what's important for members of Congress to know is that lean on those that have the expertise in this moment. And yeah, I think we can end off there. But any other just last notes, Sean, that you want to share with our followers or just anyone that is, curious about the campaign, how to get involved?
Yeah, well, look, we so appreciate people all over the country who have come forward to join this campaign. And obviously, we're very fortunate to have such a strong organizing team with you, Jax, and others on our team, Alexandra and Jocelyn. We do this together as a team, but we also depend on the people all across the country who share the vision that we are going to stand up for our Constitution, our democracy at this moment in history. We do not do this alone. This is an all hands on deck moment. And I think that, my inspiration comes from knowing that there are people all around the nation who share that vision and have the courage to stand up as millions did this past Saturday at the No Kings rallies.
Thank you, John. Yeah, same here. I think when I think about those million signatures, that we already, over a million signatures that we already have, I think about those are people just like us who are pushing to have this happen. And if that be even through sharing videos and posting across social and tagging a representative, there's so many ways that people have gotten involved. And it's just incredible to see, especially I think some people think Free Speech for People is this massive organization with the work that we're doing, but we are small. We're relatively small. I think we have 12, 13 staff. So we are doing obviously a ton of work, but we are also doing that in partnership with so many different grassroots organizations. And as a national organization, we do see the power in working at the grassroots level. And we, are excited to partner with new organizations as well. So just overall, just really, really grateful to be on this call with you, John. Thank you for taking the time. And we will see you all soon.
Thank you, Jax.
Thanks.